From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello. We're here today with a man who many consider the greatest jazz guitarist of our time, and in fact of any time, Jimm Hall. Jimm Hall, welcome to the Library of Congress.
Thank you. Is that me you described?
It is indeed.
Thank you very much.
Today is March 20th, 2009, and you were initially scheduled to perform here last October.
Right.
What happened?
I had spine surgery, and very ironic among other things, because before that I was pretty good health, I thought, and I was playing tennis and all, and then I had a spine fracture. So I was in the hospital quite a while. But I'm delighted that I'm here, especially with what's happened at the White House and everything now. So that's great.
Has the condition or the recovery impacted your playing?
I imagine it has, because I just haven't really played much. I finished a 2 CD project with Bill Frisell, kind of in between, and I was able to do that sitting down. But
that's Hemispheres.
Yeah. Hemispheres, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll see this evening. I guess I'm sure it has in a way, but on the other hand, it's going to be so refreshing and uplifting, I think, to work with Joey Barron and Steve Laspina again.
They're great musicians.
They really are great people too.
Can you say what you like about them specifically?
I like them personally, and they both listen beautifully and react well, and that's really, to me, that's what life is about, and certainly that's what music is about. Especially Joey Barron, has a great sense of humor, and we were talking about the sound and where we're going to play this evening, and it's evidently great for string quartets and that sort of thing, and it's very live, and Joey's perfect for that. He listens so well, and so they're just, I almost want to say, typical of jazz musicians. They're terrific people, and they're really easy to play with, so that ain't bad. And I'm not paying them either.
Oh, really? Okay.
Joke.
Yeah. For some of our viewers and the people who will see this on our website, who want to sort of some background and context for what kind of environment you come out of. You're born in Buffalo?
Yeah.
And you moved to Cleveland at what age?
Cleveland, I guess I was, 8 by then. We were first in kind of all over Ohio, Columbus. I was born in Buffalo because I wanted to be near my mother, actually, that's why. Yeah, it was mostly Ohio until I left for California.
And so when did you first pick up the guitar?
I think I was 9 or 10. My mom got me a guitar for my birthday and my Christmas or something like that.
So tell everyone who your Uncle Ed was and what kind of impact he had on your development.
I'm not sure still. I wish I'd gotten to know him better. Uncle Ed played country music. This was in Ohio, and sang country songs, American country songs. And I didn't really know much about him. I wish I had gotten to know him. He died before I really got to know him. Again, parenthetically, somebody put out a bootleg record in Europe, and kind of, I wasn't even the leader on some of these, but I had my name on it. And in the liner notes, it mentioned music in my family. Said my mom was a pianist, my uncle was a guitarist, and my grandfather was a conductor. And my mom played a little bit of piano, and I told you about my uncle. My grandfather was a conductor on the railroad. So
I see.
Anyhow, that's my background.
We should all give credit to our teachers.
Yes.
So who were your earliest and most important music teachers?
Well, my first teacher was a man named Jack Dupiro, and then after that, after I had really gotten, so I played in little groups and stuff, I was around a man named Fred Sharp for quite a while, and we stayed in touch till just recently, till we lost Fred. And then I managed to get into the Cleveland Institute of Music, and I was there for 5 years, and that was really important. That was probably the best decision musically I think I ever made, because I knew nothing about classical music, but I just knew I wanted to be a better musician, and they let me pay the tuition $300 at a time or something like that because I knew somebody there. And I think I probably liked Hindemith because it reminded me of Stan Kenton, and Stravinsky, of course, was Woody Herman's band. And I thought Mozart was childish. And 5 years later, Mozart became a genius.
I see.
So anyway, that was mostly it. Then the Institute of Music for 5 years.
So you mentioned Jack and you mentioned Fred. Can
Yeah.
you say what those earlier teachers taught you? Was it the basics? Was it technique?
Well, I imagine Jack DePiro was probably mostly basics, except he was also very encouraging. He seemed to think I was going to do okay. That the encouragement was important. And then Fred Sharp really took me way beyond that. Fred had worked with Red Norvo and people like that, and he started showing me some different kind of chord voicings and that sort of thing. And it really kind of opened my ears and my eyes a lot. And so he was very important to me, I think.
And then at the Institute, you're learning more theory, history and literature?
Yeah, I was a music theory major, and it was an incredible school. We had a number of teachers who had come to the States to get out of Nazi mess in Europe. And my composition teacher, his name was Marcel Dick, he had been around Arnold Schoenberg. He played viola in a string quartet that played some of Schoenberg's music and stuff. So that was his background.
So did he teach you 12-tone music?
I wrote a couple 12-tone pieces which he thought were childish, so I gave that. He didn't really emphasize that at all, but I became aware of it, and I thought I would try it out. It was a great experience, basically.
Do you still have those early attempts?
Probably not. I kind of hope not.
Oh, you don't
I have a string quartet that I wrote for my thesis. The first movement's not bad. I actually recorded it, and I opened it up so I could play a guitar solo in there. First movement's pretty good. And the second two movements, I don't remember because they were done in a hurry because I had to finish it in a hurry. But.
So when and how did you decide that music would be your life?
Well, I think my spiritual awakening, the only one, usually my spirituality has gone the other way, but I was 13, I think, and I was working in different little groups in Cleveland, Ohio, and usually it was accordion, drum, no bass. This particular one, the leader was a guy named Angelo Vienna who played clarinet, and we went to a record store and he wanted to get a Benny Goodman record, and we played a bit of it, and I heard Charlie Christian for the first time. He was playing on a tune called Grand Slam, which is a blues in F, and he played two choruses, and I remember literally thinking, I don't know what that is, but whatever, I wish I could do that, and it was Charlie Christian. So he was my first hero.
Did you take the record home and memorize the solo?
Actually, I bought a, however fast records ran, it was a 78. Yeah, that's right. I bought an album of Benny Goodman's sextet records, and I don't think we even had a record player. We might have. But I do remember the solo somehow, so maybe I must have memorized it, I guess. That's the only thing. I memorized that, and I had one Barney Kessel solo that I learned from when he was with Artie Shaw's band.
You probably still remember those solos.
I think so. I remember Charlie's solo anyway, yeah.
Do you think musicians change, or anybody changes with their environment? For example, when you move from Cleveland to Los Angeles,
Yeah.
how did that change you as a musician and as a person?
That's interesting. Yeah, I still have a friend whom I had studied big band arranging with, a guy named Joe Dolney, D-O-L-N-Y, who had moved to Los Angeles, and he had a big band that would get together once a week at the Musicians Union, so I got to be involved in that. And I think just hearing all kinds of, I studied with Vicente Gomez. I tried to learn classical guitar a little bit. I never learned it, but he was great. And I can't say specifically, but I think if you just sort of stay open, things will happen, and you'll keep evolving. For instance, the most recent thing I've been involved in is a duet project with Bill Frisell, who's completely different in a lot of ways from me. But I just try to stay open and literally live in the moment, even though we're talking about the past right now. But while I was out there, I met Chico Hamilton, and I worked with Chico, which was a great experience, and then Jimm Giuffre, and then after that
I want to ask you
Yeah,
more
sure.
about Chico and Jimmy. But you mentioned something intriguing, this business of living in the moment.
Yeah,
It sounds so simple.
yeah, yeah.
Do you find is it simple? Is it easy for you? Is simple easy?
I know interesting is a cheap word, but that is interesting because I hope that musically it's not that difficult for me, especially if I'm involved in something. But one does develop prejudices, as for instance, if I look at a picture of a music group and I see guys with tons of amplifiers and making all kinds of, I just assume they probably don't play, so that's some kind of prejudice. But it's also, I find myself, there's a marvelous young guitar player, I mean literally young, he's 20 now, his name is Julian Lage, L-A-G-E, he's marvelous. And Julian came over to the apartment a few weeks ago to talk, and I had known him since he was 11, talking about living in the moment. And he came with Brian Camilio, my friend who's here with me. And we got talking about this and that, and some names came up, and I said, Jim, don't be an old geezer. Don't tell stories about that guy from 80 years ago. So I had to stop myself and say, because one does, you do have memories of the past, and it's great to kind of put that aside and say, okay, let's move on for today. I didn't say that too clearly, but that's...
You can teach someone technique, you can teach someone theory, but can you teach someone to live in the moment?
Good question. I don't know.
I mean, how
I'll
did
call you if I ever. I don't know.
okay.
Yeah, that's
because it involves listening
yeah, right.
and yet speaking in the same time. It's engagement.
Yeah, I guess I would say it's reacting to, if talking about musically, react to what's happening at the moment, as opposed to something that you may have prepared 5 years ago or something like that. I guess, I don't know.
Well, it's something, as we say, it's simple. It sounds simple. You make it sound easy when you do it.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, it was a great experience working with Bill Frisell, because I had to do a lot of that. Just listen to what Bill did and react to it appropriately, and vice versa. I think he did the same for me. So music is great that way, and it gives you a chance to do that. And
do you find yourself wanting to surprise Bill?
That's a good question.
Does
yeah.
he do that with you?
That's interesting. I've never asked. I probably wouldn't get a straight answer from him anyway. But
do you enjoy seeing his reaction, his facial expressions?
that's interesting. I don't know if don't even know if I looked at him while we were recording, but I'm not sure. I'll have to think that over. But I'm sure it would be fun to see a look of surprise anyway. I'll think about that. Thanks.
Because your music is, as Whitney Balliet said, the sound of surprise.
Sound of surprise, right? Yeah, that's right.
So back to Chico and those Los Angeles years. That's really your first big break, where you become known to the general public in Chico Hamilton's group. How did you and Chico first hook up?
Again, I was in this big band once a week thing that my friend Joe Dolney had. And there was a French horn player involved whose name was Johnny Grass, G-R-A-A-S. And John was going to put together a small group, so I went over to John's house to rehearse. And I think this was just coincidence. Uh, anyway, Chico called while I was there and was looking for a guitar player. I don't know if should ask Chico now if he'd heard about. Anyway, John says, "Well, I have one right here," and he's just handed me the phone. And so it was kind of that simple. And then I went by Chico's house and got to know Chico, and I assume we talked a bit and maybe played some music together or something, and it was great. So the first group was Buddy Collette, Carson Smith, and Fred Katz, who played cello and piano. And I got to write for Chico's group, which was great for me because I started a master's in composition back at the Institute and bailed out on that to seek my fortune in Los Angeles. But that was a perfect setting for me right then.
It sounds fortuitous.
Yeah,
You're at this rehearsal.
Right, I know.
Do you believe in luck
I'm not sure.
or fate?
I'm not sure if I do or not. But I guess in a way I do. That good things kind of seek one another out or something like. Well, I assume it was a good thing, yeah. And then working with Chico, I think we worked opposite Jimmy Giuffre a few times, so Jimmy got to hear me. And then, oh, and also that's where I first met Sonny Rollins, was with Chico's group. We drove, of course, couldn't afford to fly in those days. And we drove, did some things along the way, and we ended up in New York at, I think it was Basin Street East or one of those clubs, and we played opposite Max Roach's group, which had Sonny Rollins and Clifford Brown, and Richie Powell was playing piano. So I got to know Sonny there a little bit, and also I knew Clifford. I saw Clifford and Richie the night before they lost their lives in that car accident. So I guess in a way that was fortuitous. Anyway, it was nice.
Your recordings that you made with Jimmy Giuffre
Mm-hmm.
and with Sonny Rollins
Mm-hmm.
are highly regarded. They hold up very well.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, everybody, I'm sure, asks you about those records. I want to ask you how you saw them as leaders. How would you compare, say,
yeah.
Jimmy with Sonny?
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for that question, because I hadn't really thought this through. They were both really helpful to me. Jimmy was helpful about specific things, about playing the guitar. For instance, he would have something written out for me where I was to either play in unison or something with either his clarinet, or he played tenor and baritone as well. And he'd say, "Jim, could you find a different way to play that, leave out some of those pick strokes, or play on some heavier strings so it blends with the clarinet?" So that was a big lesson for me about a different way to approach guitar playing, actually. And then, so first it was a trio with Ralph Pena on bass, and eventually it was a trio with Bob Brookmeyer on valve trombone and Jimmy and me. So I played rhythm guitar sometimes, and Bobby, of course, is a fantastic musician and friend. And so that it really made me aware of texture and listening and reacting. And Sonny was the same in a different way. We talk about, I guess, accompaniment, and had a great rhythm section with Bob Cranshaw and Ben Riley. And I'm still in touch with all three of them. It's funny, when I worked with Sonny, was the most taciturn person I think I ever was around. For instance, we did a piece called John S. period. And at the date, I said, "Would that be John S. Wilson?" Who was, and Sonny said, "It could be." That's all he said. Then years later, I saw an article where Sonny said that it was about John Coltrane, and the S was Sonny because John Coltrane had helped Sonny financially and stuff. So, but my point is, when I was in the hospital, Sonny called me one night and we talked for 40 minutes. So we're still really close in touch and everything.
And what do you talk about? Do you talk about music or do you talk about life?
Again, I think we just occasionally we would reminisce about funny things that happened when we were working together and stuff. And more he's open to that sort of thing. And then of course Sonny lost his wife a few years ago. Then I think we talk about just about every kind of thing, I guess. And sort of like you and I are talking, in a way. Seriously. So yeah.
Conversation.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than interview.
Yeah.
But here's an interview
Okay.
question.
All right. I got it.
Your 2 duet recordings with Bill Evans.
Yeah.
Remarkable. Again, you know, these are like holy grails for many guitarists and pianists. And I know you've said that he inspired you even before you made those sessions. Can you say in what way Bill inspired you?
Yeah, when I was with Jimmy Giuffre for Bob Brookmeyer, it was Bob Brookmeyer and Jimmy and me, and for a number of weeks, I think Bob said it was 5, maybe 8 weeks, we worked opposite Miles Davis's group at the Cafe Bohemia in the Village. And we were also doing a show with Mort Saul at the same time. Mort had this show on Broadway called The Next President. And so we'd play the show, and then we'd come down to Village, Bob and Jimmy and me. And it was obviously a fantastic group that Miles had. It was Philly Joe Jones on drums, Paul Chambers, Julian Adderley, Cannonball, it was Julian was his name, right? And John Coltrane.
And Wynton Kelly.
Sorry?
Or was it Bill or Wynton?
And Bill had just joined the group, that's my point. So I got to hear the way Bill would accompany and how I thought what he brought different to that whole setting of Miles's group. And how
Can you say what that is? How different?
He listened spectacularly, and he had just it wasn't a standard, what had become kind of bebop piano at all. It was quite different. It probably came partly from, I hate to say classical music, but that's occasionally he would sound like Debussy or something when he's playing behind Miles Davis. But the chord voicings, his use of space, I thought was marvelous, and mostly his aware of texture, how thick things were, whether it needed a chord or not, and he was very. I noticed, for instance, when we did the duet stuff, that Bill liked me to play rhythm, and as soon as I started playing rhythm, he would automatically not play any left hand, because that was my area. So that was his sensitivity to the whole texture. He figured that part of the texture is covered. You don't need that.
Was there much preparation for those sessions?
Not really, no. He came in one night, I was by then working with Sonny Rollins, and he just came in the club one night and said, "Do you want to do a duet record?" So we did it, and I do remember going up to his apartment and rehearsing. It might have been for the second one we did, I'm not sure, but I'm sure we did some kind of at least talking things over. Talk about which tunes do you like and all that sort of thing. But if I'd known I'd be talking about this now, I probably would have made notes or something, but no.
Well, that's another question. Yeah. When you're involved in these dates, especially some of these records are prized. They're considered classics now. Are you aware of how special they are at the time, in the moment? Or is it just another day in the life of Jimm Hall?
Well, I wouldn't say, well, it certainly would have been a special day anyway, because I loved Bill's playing very much and we were friends. A very bright guy with a sense of humor too. He's looked on as this tragic figure hunched over the piano, but that wasn't him that I knew. He had a great sense of humor. And
meaning he told jokes, or
he would do funny things musically sometimes. And I forget which tune it is, but there's a. Anyway, he would do musical jokes, you know.
Like quotes, he would insert.
Yeah, what's that tune? Night in Tunisia, I guess. It has an interlude, and everybody plays a million notes, and Bill would play it for fun, and then he'd just go all over the piano and hit it with his elbows and everything. So I don't think there was a lot of preparation. It was mostly just talking, getting to know one another, I think, better.
Well, here's the part of the interview where I recite a quote about you
Okay.
and get your reaction.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
The New Yorker called you a poetic player who says more with fewer notes than any living improviser. So I'm wondering, is this a conscious approach for you, or is it just something that you do naturally?
It's, I'm really not sure. It probably has something to do with my personality, I guess, but oh, first of all, I don't have, believe it or not, after all these years, I don't have fantastic facility on the guitar, especially now after this operation and everything.
What does that mean, by the way? Are there things you think of that you can't play?
That's a good question, too. I'm not sure about all that, except I know that I try to listen to what's happening in the overall texture and just add something to it, rather than taking over and making everything different. I try to enhance the moment a bit, I guess. And the way I felt that Miles Davis did, too. I felt like he could say so much with just one or two notes. It was really, to me, very profound.
By the way, you've mentioned Miles a couple times. He's one of the only people, you've played with so many.
Yeah.
And you said that he's one of the people that you wanted to play with but never was able to. And I'm wondering, did he ask you, or what were the circumstances behind that? Why didn't you ever play with him?
Yeah, he did call twice. And one time I actually went to the record date. It was something he was doing with Gil Evans, I'm not sure. And then after I got there, things were confused and ended up they didn't use guitar. And then he called me again quite a while later, and by then I was, it sounds negative, I guess, but I had been doing the Merv Griffin show for years. And I literally felt like I was out of music. I was just sitting there. It was an interesting show. We had interesting guests, but the music was pretty dreadful. And I didn't feel qualified to do it then, I felt like. So I told him to call George Benson, which he did.
Oh, I know that day.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Merv Griffin.
Yeah.
That's probably the first time I had seen you on television. I used to actually watch the show because the band was sometimes featured in the beginning.
Yeah, right.
Jack Sheldon was there. Sometimes Ray Brown was there.
That's right, yeah.
It was really a great, who was the leader? Was it Mort Lindsay?
It was Mort Lindsay, yeah.
So would you play anything hip while they're at commercial or something? What goes on behind the scenes?
Occasionally, I guess, yeah. But, well, I'll give you the gist of it in a way. I have the guitar still that I played on that show. And I was looking at it not too long ago, and I noticed there's kind of a spot right where the neck meets the body of the guitar up high here. There's a spot where all the finish is worn off. And I said, how did that happen? Then I remembered there were hours spent just with my hands on it, and I wore the finish off. So anyway, Miles called me while I was doing that show, and I just didn't think, I said, I don't know if I want to record with my hero, one of my heroes right now. So yeah, I never got to work with him, but he sure was a big influence in a lot of ways.
Many guitarists who actually study your music and study your recordings, they remark on the way you deal with time, the chances you take, the way you swing is, it's like a Jimm Hall approach to swing.
Interesting.
And I'm wondering, can you teach someone to swing?
I don't know. Wow, I'm curious. That's great. Well, my free association, I guess, my mind went to Freddie Green, who was one of my heroes. And I got to know Freddie a bit, not real well. But I always wished I had asked him more questions like that, because I heard the Basie band a couple times when Freddie was sick. He wasn't there. It was a fantastic band, but it's
not the same.
It wasn't the same without Freddie. So
Did you ever play that kind of rhythm guitar?
A bit, yeah.
Is it harder than it sounds, or
I don't know.
Put it this way, what's the challenge in playing that kind of style?
if it's right, it feels great. That's one thing. It feels good. It's like what do I say? It's like a warm bath on a cold night or something, and vice versa. I would say to kind of hook up with the rhythm section and move things forward to make the music feel like it wants to go to the next beat and that sort of thing, I guess, I imagine.
How much of that is a matter of sort of personality and listening, and how much of it is like having it in your hands, in your heart?
I'm not sure. Yeah, or can you teach it? I guess it's camaraderie and listening and wanting to make things feel better, and sort of say, yeah, let's move ahead with this. Something like that. It's an interesting question. That's one of the things I love about Ben Riley's drum playing. That's why I had called him not too long ago, because I was listening again to the Sonny Rollins record. But Ben just had a way, when I played with Ben, it felt like the quarter note had so much more space in it, just by the way he would hit the cymbals or something. I don't know what it was. And meanwhile, the time is moving beautifully to the next quarter note. So I'm not sure what that is. Probably all wrapped up in personality and the things we've been talking about previously.
One thing that might be interesting for those who are going to watch this interview, there's an assumption that jazz musicians only listen to jazz, right? And so I was intrigued when I heard you were coming and we spoke the other day, and I said, are there any things that you would like to see, any of the treasures? And you mentioned Bela Bartok.
Right.
So why Bartok? What do you love about Bartok's music?
So much. It's interesting. When I got into the Cleveland Institute of Music, I discovered him. He was nothing till I discovered him, and I just got fascinated by. Well, first of all, it was pretty far out. It still is in a lot of ways, in the best sense of the word.
Do you mean harmonically?
Harmonically, and he would take all kinds of chances. If you listen to all the string quartets, you can see how he developed all that. And he and Zoltan Kodály evidently were very interested in Hungarian folk music. So I'm sure, I imagine a lot of this stuff is kind of maybe comes from that. But he seemed to be moving forward all the time, and it wasn't as difficult to feel and to get, quote, into as Schoenberg and people like that. It was more folksy in a lot of ways, and it had a human appeal and a heartbeat and all that sort of thing, and yet it was pretty, quote, far out, unquote, too. I just really loved it. I still do.
Were there specific pieces that drew you?
The two orchestra concertos concerti is it? The two things for orchestra they wrote that I know about. And one was concerto for strings, percussion, and celeste. I really loved that.
Can you say why?
There's some beautiful melodies in it, and it's interesting. I haven't heard them for a while, either one of those concertos, but for some reason that second one that I mentioned for strings, percussion, and celeste, I love. And yet there's a couple of really lovely melodies involved in it, and yet it gets very, quote, far out. I hate that term, far out, but very, think of another way to say it, kind of stimulating mentally, and it's, you won't fall asleep listening to it, I think.
When you listen to music, is it for pleasure, or are you analyzing?
Probably pleasure, and I'm hoping that it'll sink in. If it's something that I'm enjoying, it'll sink in and do me some good. But I generally don't listen to guitar players, partly because then I think, boy, I wish I could do that, and it starts to get it. Why is he? Except that young man that I mentioned earlier, Julian Lage, he's so inspiring because it doesn't sound like bebop or anything. It just sounds like he's pushing the envelope, even, or whatever one says about that further. But, So I'm sure that anything that you hear kind of sinks in, and you do listen to it maybe analytically in a certain sense, but it starts out just being for pleasure. And if it's stupid music, you, you just I hope turn it off or something, or try not to hear it again.
I wonder if you're aware of the impact that you've had. I mean, there are several generations of musicians. In fact, if you go to the Berklee College of Music, there are dozens of young guitarists who are going through the program, and they know all your stuff. They've transcribed your solos.
Yeah.
They've listened to the recordings, and I just wonder if you're aware of your stature.
No. And I hope again, it's a part of my wish and need to live in the moment. I just sort of hope that I'm thinking about this evening's performance at the moment, not literally thinking about it, but I got together with a man earlier today named Fred Carnes, who took lessons with me years ago, and we had kind of lost touch. And it's a marvelous guy, really bright, does all kinds of things. And we were talking a similar conversation, and I guess a quick answer would be no, I'm not.
Well, I heard you talk about the impact that Charlie Christian solo had.
Yeah,
on you,
right, yeah.
Grand Slam. And surely people are feeling that way about some of your recordings, younger people today. And so there's a kind of continuum.
Yeah, well, I see what you mean, yeah. Unfortunately, Charlie Christian, I think, was already gone by the time I heard that record. He died very young, but
Early 40s.
yeah, I wish I could have known him. It's nice to hear that, for instance, the Bill Evans records, I still feel good about. I actually have a copy of Undercurrent still, and I have heard it occasionally.
Is it difficult for you to listen to your own stuff?
Yeah, it is.
Why?
Well, not so much if it's a long time ago, but if it's recent stuff, I'm still kind of second guessing myself. But this things with Bill or maybe with Sonny, I guess because it's still you. I recently heard a record I'd done with Art Farmer in the '70s, and it's called Big Blues. And I actually said, "Well, Jim, you sound good on that thing." So, but in general, it is kind of difficult because I always start second guessing yourself. I guess you forgive yourself after a while, but
A lot of creative people have this.
yeah, I guess.
And I remember hearing Jackie Gleason say when he would watch his show, he would never watch himself. He was always watching
Watch
Art
somebody
Farmer.
else. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Are you a disciplined person, either when it comes to music or otherwise?
In a word, no. In fact, interesting question and train of thought. Elliot Carter lives right down the block from me.
And his collection is here.
Oh, I bet it is. I never thought of that. Wow. And he's 100 years old, as you know. He just turned 100. And I don't really know him, but we see each other occasionally on the street. And I guess he knows I'm involved in music because occasionally I'll say Andre Previn says hello or something like that, you know. And he seems like a great guy. He's really bright and everything. But sometimes I'll be at home and I'll be thinking about, well, you got to write something, and I can't. I say, come on, man, you got 100-year-old band down the block, and he's writing all the time. So discipline. If I have a deadline is an appropriate term, and I wrote a piece for orchestra a few years ago, guitar, and it was for the Baltimore Symphony, and there was a deadline, and so I was able to. I would get up at 6 and start writing every day because there was no other choice. A deadline is an appropriate term in a way. But in general, well, the guitar isn't too difficult that way because it kind of draws me to it, to play it. But I think in a certain sense, discipline probably is difficult, yeah.
Would you say, I'm curious about your relationship with the guitar.
Yeah.
You've been playing it for so long.
Yeah.
Is it a forgiving instrument?
Good question. It's still hard for me to tune it, believe it or not, yeah.
Why? What's hard about tuning it?
Because it sounds different in every key, I think. In fact, I remember talking with Barry Galbraith about that, who was a dear friend, and Barry did a lot of studio work. And as you know, guitars tuned with these silly open strings, E, and Barry said, if I tune up to A the way everybody does, he said, I'll get all my open strings in tune, and then, but as soon as I play in a flat key, the guitar is completely out of tune. So Barry would always tune up to B flat or something like that. So that's what I meant by it's unforgiving. You might get it in tune in E major, and then it sounds terrible in B flat major or something.
Yeah, but you've been, in your recovery, you haven't been playing quite as much.
Right.
So when you do pick up the guitar, is it familiar? Is it something that you actually have to work to build up the memory in your fingers? I've
had to work, and what's happened, especially my left hand, I think, maybe partly from having used walkers and stuff, because this gets you get some soreness in there. So I make sure that my hands are warmed up under warm water and everything before I start playing, and that sort of.
Just like Glenn Gould.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he did that too, didn't he?
Have you ever felt blocked creatively?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. Again, train of thought, I have a book about Stravinsky, and I remember that his quote, he said something about he would start writing every day, and if he couldn't think of any, just to keep the pencil or the pen moving, he would write his name, and then he'd write it upside down, but just to keep things moving. So I have done stuff like that. Sometimes I'll just start, for instance, when I had to go to the hospital not too long ago for some exam, so I took a bunch of music paper and I just started scribbling away on it, just to get the pencil moving. But
do you just write when you compose? Is it just sitting at a desk, or are you with your instrument, or at a piano, or what?
It's all three. If it's something that usually if it's something that's more than a 12-bar blues, a lot of times I'll make a sketch first, almost the way a painter would. I want, for instance, with the orchestra piece, I knew that I wanted an introduction, and then when the guitar came in, this guitar and orchestra, I wanted it to be a nice surprise. So I almost made a sketch of the dynamics, how loud I wanted it to start, and then build here, and then set up the thing where the guitar comes in, bam. So it was like a blueprint in a way that I did first for this thing.
We were talking a little bit earlier about sort of analyzing music.
Yeah.
And I can't help but note that your wife is a singer and a songwriter,
right.
But she's also a psychoanalyst.
Psychoanalyst, right.
And I wondered if she's ever analyzed your creative personality.
I'll have to ask. Probably.
Have you ever talked about this?
Not really. But she does notice, obviously, if I'm not being productive and that sort of thing. And I'll give her a call later today and see what she says, yeah.
Okay. We were discussing how you react to listening to your music.
Yeah.
Or listening to your performances. But there's a really intriguing documentary film that was made about you quite recently. It's called Jimm Hall, A Life in Progress.
Life in Progress, right.
And I wonder how you feel about watching yourself on film.
Not too comfortable about that either, really. The thing that I do like about that film is that well, John Lewis was in it, and I think Nat Hentoff even said a few things in there. So I like it that I got to talk with John, and who also had a dog named Django, but Django is our dog's name, so that was nice. And I had written an arrangement of Django, which was John Lewis's composition, and John liked it. So, yeah, I'm sure probably, I don't know about you, but yeah, it's difficult to look at yourself on.
Because you second guess?
Sorry? Probably, yeah, something like that.
Well, it's a really interesting glimpse,
Uh-huh.
especially for those studying your music. It's one thing to read the notes on the page.
Yeah,
It's another to listen to a sound recording.
yeah.
But there's something further still when you actually see you holding your instrument.
Uh-huh.
It's revealing in
That's
some ways.
interesting, yeah. Yeah, well, if it were the other way around, if I were get to watch Bela Bartok composing or playing the piano, I'd say, wow, that's great, let me see that again, you know. And Bela Bartok probably said, would you turn that off, please? Yeah.
Probably. I guess we're all self-conscious.
I imagine, yeah, that's a good term, right.
I know that you played at the White House. I should ask you, do you remember the first time you came to Washington to play?
I know I was here with Art Farmer.
So it'd be early 60s?
Yeah, and with Sonny Rollins, we were in Washington, too.
Was it a club or concert?
With Art, I know it was a club. I don't know if I played here with Chico Hamilton or not. In a word, no, I don't remember specifically the first time, no.
Did you know any of the Washington, D.C. guitarists, Charlie Bird or
Charlie,
Bill Harris? Or
sorry?
Bill Harris or Sophocles Pappas or...
Charlie Bird I knew slightly, or maybe just over the phone, I'm not even sure.
Well, so I was about to ask you about this Ellington birthday celebration at the White House.
Yeah.
You were part of this incredible all-star band that was put together. And there has, in fact, been a recording that was issued of that night. But I have a feeling that you were not the biggest fan of Richard Nixon.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how am I going to say this.
And so I wonder how you felt about being there that night. I'm sure you loved Duke.
Yeah, exactly.
But then how do you reconcile that with...
Yeah. I wasn't going to go. A bunch of us were invited. Leonard Garment, who was one of the... His brother Charlie was a close friend. In fact, Charlie was the best man at our wedding, Charlie Garment. Anyway, Jerry Mulligan wrote some nice arrangements. Joe Williams sang. Paul Desmond was in the group. Hank Jones, Milt Hinton, all. But I was not going to go. And then I rationalized it, I guess. I said, well, it's not his White House. It's our White House, and I want to see it. And Jane got to go. And I love Duke, so I said, I'll go, but I won't shake his hand. So there was a receiving line to meet him. I can actually say Nixon. This other guy's name I can't even say still. The one who just left.
Yeah.
But, so I pretended I had something to do. And then at the end, Nixon jumped up on the stage and shook everybody's hand, and I wasn't ready for that, so I actually did shake his hand. No, I did not, and I just absolutely, Duke was so great. He looked like he should be living in the White House. You know, I have some pictures of my wife Janie dancing with Duke Ellington at the White House and all that. So it was a great evening, and it was great being around Paul, Desmond, and Mulligan.
But I understand one or more of the musicians objected to the recording being released for many years.
Yeah.
Was that you?
Yes.
And why?
Because of what we just said.
Oh, because it's the Nixon.
Yeah, and also we weren't told it was going to be recorded. Imagine that, it was recorded.
Was it Voice of America who recorded it?
Probably, yeah. I hadn't even thought of that. Willis Conover, and Willis was there. And I got this, that was my interview, I got this letter from, I guess it was Leonard Garment. He said, "Dear Jim, wasn't that a marvelous time we had at the White House?" And it said, "It's all been recorded and it's going to be..." So I wrote back and I said, "As your friend, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't want my name or my music involved in this." And so I refused, like, for years. And then it came up, it finally came out. I called Stanley Crouch, actually, who's involved in the Lincoln Center thing. I called some friends and I said, "How?" So Stanley sort of said, "Well, they're going to put it out eventually anyway after you're gone." And I think another thing is I didn't play too well on that, so I didn't want that.
I find that hard to believe.
I remember playing, I think it was In a Sentimental Mood as a duet with Milton, and Duke Ellington was sitting there, and it's his tune, and I played a wrong chord on it. I remember that. Afterwards, I said, oh man, that's the wrong harmonization. So, but yeah, but that was a kind of a stunning evening, and it was great being around Paul, and as I said, my wife Jane got to go.
Are you politically aware? I mean, and do you think musicians or artists should be?
I wasn't until till the Vietnam War started. I think I was kind of tuned out of all that. But when people start killing one another with no end in sight for no really logical reason, that does tend to get one's attention, I think. And not only that, having played music with people from all these countries, and just it's so beautiful, and there's some beautiful people all over the world. Yeah, it does make you, I guess, quote, politically aware in a sense. I keep looking up that term political too, and I'm still not sure what that means, what politics means. But
surely there's politics in music.
In what sense? You mean dealing with
the business and how decisions are made, and how gatekeepers operate?
Yeah.
What kind of opportunities arise because of non-musical factors?
That's a good point, I think, yeah. I got to go, funny train of thought, I've never been to China, but I got to go to Seoul, to South Korea, and it was a great experience. The people were marvelous. And it was right before we started this war in Iraq. They had a huge peace march with some of the same signs that we did and all. And I think just having traveled so much and being around different cultures and different people, it does make one wonder how people, quote, in charge of governments make these incredibly bad decisions so often, and sometimes not only bad, but calculatingly malicious decisions. And so, yeah, I guess one does, you get to be politically aware, or at least I did, just from that, I think.
So we're here in Washington. In fact, we're right across the street from the United States Capitol.
Yeah.
And we're just down the street from the White House.
Yeah.
If you had a chance to talk to President Obama, what would you want to talk to him about?
That's interesting. I almost get teared up thinking about what a marvelous day that was, the inauguration day. I think I was more touched by the people down there just looking around. I just would want to wish him well. He's really taken over when we're in the toilet from the last 8 years, and he's got so much work. Well, it was so beautiful to see that happen, though. And obviously, in a way, I hate the term African American. Anybody, if you've been, no matter what, like I'm an American. You're an American. Doesn't matter where you're from, but if you have black blood in you, you're always African American. But it was just, it's my African American friends, musicians, are, you know, we talk about this, and we talk about the old days, which weren't that long ago, when they couldn't be served in the same restaurant with me and that sort of thing. So we'd all have to leave. And I don't know, all that is wrapped up. I would just sort of shake his hand and say, okay.
Let's, I know time is sort of running out, so
Yeah.
I want to sort of close with a couple questions.
Sure.
And the first is, when I asked you when you knew that music would be your life, and you imagined your life as a musician, maybe when you were younger, or maybe periodically throughout your life, how different is the reality from what you imagined it to be?
I'm not sure, really. And again, I'm not sure that I ever thought of what it would be like. I'm sure I had heroes that I admired, and I thought about that, and I got to play with a number of them.
Well, can you talk just about what your life has been like in music.
Yeah, it's been pretty incredible, actually. And the people that I've gotten to know and to play with and just to be able to keep doing it. Fortunately, Janie, my wife, helps. She's had to support us this last year because I've been laid up here with this injury. It's been very rewarding. I don't really think that through too often, so in a way I'm glad you asked that. So, but no, I could not have. Again, I guess I do live in the moment in a certain sense. For instance, I can't really tell you what tonight's concert is going to be like. I hope it'll be something I can grin about later on in the evening.
Will you decide on stage what songs you're going to play, or do you have a set list?
Oh, I have
prepared?
Yeah, that I always have to do that ahead of time. Otherwise, you're up there and say, "What do you want to play?" And the other guy says, "I don't know." And the audience says, "Who cares?" So I always have a list, and then I'll change it if it feels like it needs changing, just to have some variety and some surprises and that sort of thing.
Okay, so here's sort of the kicker.
Okay.
The big question.
What kind of strings do I use? Okay.
If you want, you can tell us.
That's
In 12-step programs, people talk about taking things one day at a time.
Yeah.
But you say you take things one note at a time.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So tell us, what does this music, your music, mean to you?
What does my music mean to me? Well, what came to mind is that it is me, actually, which is good for me to remember. It means a way of communicating, and I hope bringing something decent to, possibly to the world, but certainly to whomever is listening or whoever. Making things a little better maybe than they were the note before or something like that. I hope, I guess, maybe making things better. One note at a time.
Well, I can say the world is better for having you been in it.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Thank
music.
you very much.
Thank you, Jimm Hall.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.